Hey there. How are you feeling tonight? Does that make you want to answer a question? How are you feeling? Tonight we are talking about emotions and just that simple question, right? How are you feeling? Actually might starts making you think about our emotions, right? Um, Welcome to organizational behavior. We're talking about chapter 4 tonight. Let me go ahead and start sharing screen and we share some notes with you. Emotions play a big part of our workplace. Almost working. There we go, maybe. All right. Especially in the United States, we have this separation of work and home, or work and feelings. And in the past, it used to be thought that your cognitive beliefs, your thoughts, were the driving force behind your behavior. Of course, nowadays, this is more of a topic of conversation. More research has been done, and we see that emotions play a big role. Not just thoughts. Now, our emotions drive, again, we think about like behavior. We talked a couple of chapters ago about your drive or your personality, your values, and what you value might also drive your behavior. Emotions play a big role as well. And motivation. How I'm feeling will kind of dictate whether I'm going to have a good day or a bad day at work, whether I'm going to get a lot done or very little done. When you read through chapter 4 in your book, this is actually a pretty big section. Again, I want to pull out just a little bit of real life and just kind of encourage you to think about some different perspectives when we're talking about these areas. So think about when you show up to work, when you show up to class, when you go click on a video to watch a lecture or to hop into an exam. How are you feeling? Are you feeling tired? Are you hungry? Did you just have a fight with a significant other? At work, did you have a disagreement last week or yesterday at the end of the day with a colleague? And now you're coming back the next day and you're having to sit right next to them. How are you feeling about that? Did you hit traffic on the way to work or the way home? Did you have a car accident? Did you see a car accident? All this can affect how you're feeling in that day, right? Maybe you're thinking about family. You've got a family member that's sick or a family member that's traveling or out of the area. Maybe it's a rainy day and you haven't been outside in a couple days or a couple weeks. Maybe you haven't had sun touching your skin, which creates vitamin D in your system, which helps your overall attitude. All of these different emotions can affect you in the workplace. Again, I think this is more widely acceptable today than it has been in the past. Even more so that I have some family in Oregon where it is cloudy a lot of the year. They have sun for maybe 2 months, which is when I go visit during the summer. But most of the year it's gray and it's overcast and might be raining. And this has become such a well-known thing, this kind of seasonal depression that people put in their homes, these UV lights that help their body naturally create more vitamin D, in addition to taking vitamin D supplements and those kind of things that are known to help your emotional state and depression when you're not getting enough sun. So I feel like we're at a better place, and we realize that these emotions, when you're walking into work, those emotions don't just go away. We carry all that with us. And so again, I want to encourage you, as I've done with other chapters, as you're thinking about your emotions and thinking about in yourself when you're going to class, when you're going into work, how those emotions play toward your motivation. Do you want to be there? Do you want to get work done? Do you want to do a good job? maybe you don't even you just don't care that day. To check yourself on that, right? Maybe it's better to take a sick day than to sit there and not do a good job at your job. Or if you sit there and do not a good job, what's your manager going to think about that? What if you have 2 bad days in a row? How is that going to come off towards your boss or manager? And also with this perspective, again, I'm encouraging you to think outside of yourself. That's a lot of the focus through this book, right? You're learning about yourself, you're understanding these concepts. What about your coworkers? What about your manager? What about one day when you are the manager, right? Understanding that all of your employees, they have emotions. They're going to have good days and they're going to have bad days. One of the things I try to do and remind myself, and I think this came for me, I think this came from being the youngest of 4, and all of my siblings are sisters. So I have all older sisters, and the one closest to me is 9 years old. So when she was like 16 and dating, I was like 7. And so imagine that, right? Coming into adolescence, 18, and there's a 9-year-old at home. So she trained me pretty well. And my oldest sister is like 16 years older than me. And so that's almost like not even a sister, right? Like if we weren't siblings, I probably would never hang out with her because she's not in my same generation even. But my youngest sister, I felt like she trained me up pretty well. I'm not saying she was nice. She would come home from a date and pin me to the floor and yell at me, "If you ever do this to a girl, I'm gonna kill you." And hang spit over my face and that kind of thing. So I learned pretty young this idea that I don't know everything. And even if I know somebody really well, I can't necessarily know what they're feeling or control what they're feeling. And so when we're talking about these emotions, I want you to keep this in mind, that you cannot assume that you know what somebody else is feeling, that you know what somebody else is experiencing in that moment. Don't assume that you know. And I'll put in here just an easier word, hopefully, to relate this to. Be humble enough to realize that you can be wrong. Be humble enough to realize that you don't know everything. Be humble enough to realize that your action, though you think it's the right action, may not be the right action in that moment. Be humble enough to change your actions or to change your perspective, to realize that you can do things better. Listen. My sister kind of forced me, but I'm now encouraging you, listen to people, listen to their words, listen to their body language, their facial expressions. This chapter actually has some pictures of people giving you different facial expressions, because that unspoken emotion, that unspoken communication is so telling. Even when somebody can't find the words to express how they're feeling, oftentimes their face can tell you. Again, sorry to bring it up again, this comes back to emotional intelligence though, right? You're not just realizing in yourself, but you're realizing what other people are feeling and experiencing. So in the workplace, I want to focus, again, this is a management class, a business class. I want to keep the focus on business, but again, we all have emotions, right? We can't just check those at the door. In the workplace, there's some interesting things that can be done. And I'm just going to make the note here of like triggers. So one thing that was kind of interesting a couple of years ago, maybe 10 years ago or so, there's this popular thing that came where companies were looking at the layouts, the floor plans of their workspaces. And they wanted to communicate their values to their employees, that everybody is treated equally and everybody is valued. And the lowest paid, late night lectures, the lowest paid minimum wage worker is sitting at the same floor and the same level in the same space as the CEO We're going to get rid of all of the offices, and we're going to put desks everywhere and seats everywhere so that everybody can communicate openly and walk across and talk to somebody really easily. But I think it quickly became understood that it's kind of difficult to work in that environment. If you have no personal space around you, and when you pick up the phone, but it's hard to talk on the phone because the person right across from you is having a phone conversation, that can actually be really frustrating, right? And so I feel like as we make changes in the workplace, or as new ideas come up in the workplace, we have to keep this in mind. People have emotions. When they're working 8 hours a day in a space, maybe we can work to remove any things that would trigger these negative emotions. If we know about we talked about chapter 2 about different personality traits. If we know that there's 2 employees that are opposite ends of that spectrum, again, we know that diversity is good in the workplace. But if there's conflict between 2 employees, let's not put them together. Let's not sit them next to each other, because it's just going to fuel that fire. So keeping this mindset of emotion in the workplace, we might be able to work to remove those triggers. Sometimes I've been in some offices, gosh, a couple of years back, I went into Zillow, a corporate office of Zillow, the one that's in Irvine. And I was really interested because when you go up into the workspace, they had this whole corner of the office that was all quiet. And we walked through as the tour people, right? And it was so quiet that I almost felt bad talking out loud. And everybody in that corner, people were typing away and they had headphones in and they were just working away. And then we turned the corner and hit the other, the south edge of the building. And it was loud. Like the little tour group that we had, it was hard to even talk to each other because there was so much conversation happening over in this area. It was the sales area. And so people are on the phones, they're negotiating, they're talking about contracts, different terms and prices, and you've got 2 people right next to each other talking on phones to different, potential clients, and it created a big buzz. But really quickly, we were feeling like, wow, how can these people work in this environment that's so loud? It was just loud for us to even just stand there and listen to. And so when we think about emotions and what triggers people, and this maybe lack of personal space or lack of control in your workplace, that might have a negative effect on people's emotions when they're working. On the flip, we can also look at this and say, how do we create a workplace that has positive emotions? The book has an example. They talk about this effort that they do at the workplace in the book. Excuse me. But when I read and I was reviewing this, I immediately thought of my workplace at Irvine Valley College. The last year, the college has put a lot of effort and into a lot of kind of organization into creating these teams of people, and it's called Caring Campus. And so there's actually a team of people that are focused on, outside of their job, this is kind of an extra thing, but focusing on making sure that people are cared for, that students have good experiences, that staff have a good experience at the workplace. And some of the practices have also changed in this regard. So for example, I'll show up to a meeting, and so for the first 5 or 10 minutes of that meeting, the Caring Campus person will ask, and will actually call on people, hey Rick, what have you experienced this week that was positive in the workplace? And that you might feel nervous thinking about that, right? Like, oh, is somebody going to call on me? But it kind of forces you to start thinking about the positives that you experience at work. And sure enough, oh, I had a great experience last week. I was in a meeting and somebody had a perspective and I was able to bring up my perspective. And you know what? I really liked the person, but we disagreed. We have different opinions. And that's okay. And that can be a caring campus moment, because we can respect each other and treat each other professionally and like each other, but we can disagree on things. And so this idea of having a positive emotion, or bringing a positive emotion, a positive culture to the workplace, can actually help employees and clients, customers, that kind of thing, feel more positive when they're interacting with the organization. And kind of like how I actually started the recording here, and I asked you, hey, how are you feeling tonight? Just that simple question, how are you feeling? Some of you probably mentally went to that easy place. Oh, I'm fine. I'm good. Right. But sometimes when you ask in that way, how are you feeling today? You actually think about your feelings. Right. And so just that simple question, and giving you some space, or in the workplace, your coworkers or colleagues, employees, giving you the space to think about that for a minute. Go, how am I feeling? Gosh, I am kind of tired right now. Yeah, I'm gonna have to work hard. I might need to go get another coffee, or I might need to work really hard to focus today. But yeah, I want to be here. I want to do a good job, right? So being able to recognize that, and maybe just mention it verbally, can help people bring that to light. Of course, how you deal with all of this comes back a lot to chapter 2, when we talked about different personality traits. But again, in the workplace, we can actually take steps to make it a positive emotional environment. No matter what you're feeling, maybe how you're feeling, you might think, hey, it's inappropriate for me to share this at work. And that's okay too. If you're feeling that way, you're feeling how you're feeling, right? You can't just shut that down. Most people can't. If you have the ability to hide it very well, you might put on a different face, right? Oh, I'm super tired. I'm super frustrated, but I'm yawning a lot, but I'm going to put on a happy face, and I'm going to show you that I'm feeling ready to work. I'm feeling motivated right now. This is called a display. And yes, I'm kind of being overly dramatic right now, but this happens at work too, right? When you show up and you're walking around and you're grumpy, or you're tired and nobody wants to talk to you, that's probably not appropriate. Or maybe you're angry, and you got to really watch out with that emotion when you're walking into work, because that can cause problems in the workplace, right? So what I would encourage you, and again, you're going to read about this in the chapter about this emotional display. What I appreciate the book, it talked about were different strategies to regulate this. And again, maybe you're really in touch with yourself, right? You're really in touch with your emotions and how to manage those emotions. And I kind of think of myself as a pretty level guy. There's times when I get upset. There's times when I get sad, or mad, or whatever. But for the most part, I'm pretty even keel. And I can kind of control, if I'm in a situation, I usually can control that expression of my emotion. I know that's not the case for everybody. A big key I want you to take away with from this section, and talking about your emotional display and what you're showing, or how you're reacting to situations, particularly in the workplace. Know enough about yourself. If you can't control that emotion, step back and walk away. Remove yourself from that situation. And I think for me, over the years, it has really helped to have a confidant, to have somebody that I could sit down with and talk to, and in a couple different lights. And again, forgive me if you're like so in tune with yourself and at work and stuff, this is like repetitive, but I have found that I have at home somebody who I trust a lot, my wife, that I can talk to about certain things when I'm frustrated, when I'm tired, and that kind of thing. I have also found that I have a really close friend that does not work with me. I've known him for a couple decades, and we can pretty much have open conversations about anything. he's probably like the one friend that I have that I can do that with. And I know that we can disagree and I might say something and he's not going to be offended. And he might say something and I'm not going to be offended. And we're talking on the phone and one of our kids starts yelling behind us. That in any point in any of our conversations, we have the freedom and I guess the trust enough to know, hey, I got to hop off, talk to you later, hang up. And we're not going to have hurt feelings because we left the conversation short. Having a connection or the trust to be able to communicate openly with somebody, I think is really powerful, to be able to express those emotions so that I could then display maybe an appropriate emotion in the workplace. I think there's a value in having somebody like that outside of your workplace. I think there's value in having somebody like that inside your workplace as well. Because if you have somebody at work, they're going to be familiar with what you're dealing with a little bit more so. They're going to be familiar with the different maybe charges that the company is putting out there, a new product line, a new human resource effort for supporting employees. They're just going to know more of what's going on that you're dealing with at work. I'm not saying it's easy to find these people, but I'm saying if you can, or if you mentally have the idea, oh, I'm going to see if I can connect with somebody who I can trust and they can trust me. That's not like a relationship, right? We want to make sure that it's a healthy relationship, especially at the workplace. But I feel like this ability to talk about it can also help back up what you'll read about in the book, the strategies to regulate. That's just a little bit of personal perspective I had coming into the section. I thought, if somebody's really upset, how can you regulate that? It's really hard sometimes, and not everybody can. How do we get over that urgent, that fight back, that quick to respond thing that comes out of us sometimes? And I feel like being able to talk about it with somebody can really help. Again, your book gives you some strategies. I don't want to go over those in detail here. You're going to read about it. But I thought this was an interesting section because of this idea of display, this face that we put on for emotion. And then, of course, emotional intelligence or EQ is mentioned in this chapter. Again, for me, this is a bigger deal. We talked about chapter 2, Myers-Briggs, and kind of learning about your personality. And I think for me, this EQ is kind of that next level. It's not just learning about my personality or how I treat people or how I process information, but it's also my understanding about how you do those things. And coming back again to this concept of maybe being humble and being understanding enough to accept somebody else and how they process as well. The one cool thing about EQ in week 4 next week, you all are going to be doing a project individually, but a project that involves EQ. It's not meant to be hard. It is open now. The whole module is not open, but you can look up this assignment if you wanted to start working on it or reading about it over the weekend. I have you do an EQ assessment on yourself. Again, you probably did this with Myers-Briggs, and I have you do a little bit of self-evaluation. No chapter to read next week. There is a discussion board, but basically you're reading and all your work that you would typically do with a chapter in a normal week, you're going to be putting into this project. Not meant to be difficult. It will take some time and it will take some self-reflection, but it shouldn't be difficult. Again, understanding yourself in this light is super important in business, even though your business will probably never talk about it. Another section that comes up here is talking about job satisfaction. Now, job satisfaction, so I'm just looking back over my notes right here. We talked a bit in chapter 2, I think it was, when we were talking about congruence. When I have a value or a personality trait that matches up with my company, I'm going to be happier at work. I'm going to be more efficient and produce more at work. Again, diversity is good in the workplace, right? So if I don't have that value, or I don't have the same personality traits as my company values, that's okay. But we normally see with job satisfaction where we have this kind of congruent, this matching value system. There's also a thing that comes up in the section that talks about commitment. We saw with that congruent value, when there's an overlap of personal and company values, and then we also have employees that are more committed, that are willing to do a better job, that are willing to stay later, that are willing to work, for instead of an average of a couple years, maybe it's, a decade or a lifetime of employment through the company. When we're looking at job satisfaction, I like to come back. We talked about this in chapter 1, but those Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I think when we're talking about job satisfaction, whether we have congruent values or not with our employees, as a company, we need to try to meet the needs of our employees. Again, I feel in the last couple years, decade or so, companies have become a little bit more in tune with this. For example, we have big employers like Google who will create campuses for their employees. And they have, a cafeteria where employees can eat for free all day long. They have, basically free technology that they can use throughout the day, both on their work product and on their personal projects. And they want to create an environment where employees actually want to be at work all day long and maybe even never go home. And so much so that we see this Maslow's hierarchy of need. Some of those are actually taken care of by the employer, like food and maybe even, shelter on those super base levels of this triangle that we learned in chapter 1. Does the workplace have to provide these things? No, they don't. They have to provide a paycheck for the work you do. I mean, basically that's what it comes down to, right? But if a company can, or if the company does commit to this level of job satisfaction for its employees, we see that the employees are more efficient, are more creative, they work harder, they work longer for you. So as a company, you look at that and you think, Google, are you crazy? You make food for all of your employees for free on campus. And they see that as a huge benefit for their employees, and it makes the employees want to stay there longer. So it's better for the employee, right? It helps them meet this hierarchy of needs. It helps them do a better job. And then in turn, it's better for the company as well. I've seen also things come up in the past couple of years with different companies, like providing free mental health care to employees, more so than in the past, being able to have access to like counseling and somebody to talk to, like a therapist, when you're having a hard time. Even if it's not basic health insurance, well, in California, we have some basic health insurance. So employers working harder to make sure that employees are taken care of in that way is another way that they can feel satisfied and taken care of in the workplace. Again, these shared values. So for a company, thinking about different ways that you can communicate to new employees, thinking about ways that we can market new jobs to potential employees. And I'm not saying select those employees based only on their values and the congruent values as the company, because again, diversity is good. But the idea that if the company is putting out there, these are my values, chances are you're going to have more potential employees saying, hey, those are my values too. I'm going to apply for that job. And so it can encourage people that have similar values, again, diverse experiences, but maybe shared values in a certain way, which again can help in that job satisfaction. I mentioned this word earlier. Again, it's hard to find in the workplace, I think, for most people in their jobs. But trust. If you have a situation where the employees trust their colleagues, trust their managers, trust the CE, the board, and the company, you are building in that company more stable, more satisfied, more committed employees. So again, we're talking about job satisfaction, commitment. I'll make a couple of notes here real quick. Support and well-being. Again, this could be health insurance, this could be mental health, this could be any type of support that maybe human resources could offer to an employee to support them on a personal level, right? Emotional, their issues or things that are happening for them. Shared values are also going to bring more satisfaction. And trust. So I talked about these. Here are the notes I was referencing, looking through chapter 4 there. Another thing that comes up, which I think is great in this chapter, is stress. Again, I feel like a lot of this comes down to, for most employees, it's whether I have a good manager or not, whether I feel valued at work or not. And a lot of that comes down to our interpersonal connection, our interpersonal relationships with our colleagues and with our managers. As an employee yourself walking into work, I think this is a good, again, we're talking about self-reflection in a lot of this, but thinking about your own stress level and what it is that's stressing you out. Is it possible to put that on hold so that you could focus on work in the short term, do great at work, go take a lunch break and stress out again? Right? I know that seems a little, maybe that's not mentally healthy for you, right? But it also wouldn't necessarily be healthy for you to take all of that stress into the workplace to affect your work product. As you, the employee, right? You and your colleagues, you and your managers, or you as a manager, are you aware? Do you have enough forethought and enough open-mindedness to realize how much stress your employees are carrying? Are your employees stressed? Is your team stressed? Is there a big project that's due at the end of the week and everybody's trying to get it done? How do we mitigate that? How do we lessen that stress? How do we plan ahead for that stress? Communication, setting goals, setting timelines, how we interact with people. I think a big one, like in this area, and we kind of talked about it. I don't know if I wrote it down. Just the ability to talk. I think if we can acknowledge that there is stress, to be aware enough to walk up to an employee and say, hi, I understand that it's a stressful time right now, and I want to give you some time to work on this project today, and hopefully that will help alleviate some of your stress. But I have this other thing that we have to get done too. I think just that simple comment or the acknowledgement that there is, in fact, stress that's happening, that you're aware that that other person is stressed and being able to say it out loud, I think that recognition can go a long way. And it can actually mitigate it. It can lessen that stress that's there. Some of this goes super basic though. People can be super stressed out at work when there's an expectation put on them, but they don't actually have the tools to do the job. You can't go to a 5-year-old and say, here's a piano, play some Bach for me, play some Mozart. That's ridiculous. If they've never taken a piano lesson and they're a kid, how in the world could they pull that off? They can't. So in the workplace, in the same way, we can't ask our employees, we can't expect our colleagues to do certain things if they don't have the tools that they need. I know it sounds really basic, but sometimes in the workplace, when goals, when expansion, when sales, when dollars are driving decisions, sometimes it's not thought about. So having that mindset, again, the humility, the to be able to be humble enough to take a step back and realize what's happening and the stress that people are feeling can go a really long way. A lot of stress is interpersonal. So being mindful that as a manager or as a colleague, that my actions, my words can cause you stress, that you might already be stressed, or the interactions that you're having with your colleagues might also be causing stress. Like these interpersonal relationships can cause that. It's a natural part of our social beings are to have, at times interpersonal conflict can happen. We have to recognize that. We have to know that it's there. Not know when it's always there, right? But realize that it can be there. Sometimes, and whether it's low staffing, which is a big issue right now, there's just not enough people to do work. In all trades, in all sorts of different trades, in all sorts of different, how can I say it, different pay levels, right? A minimum wage job and a middle manager job. There's just staff shortages happening all over the place right now. And maybe it's because of that, or maybe because there's just too much sales or too much emphasis on expansion and those kind of things. Maybe there's just too much work. You show up to work, and when you leave, you actually have more work to do than when you did when you came in, right? That can cause stress. And when you come in the next day and it doesn't get any better, and then you come in the next day and it doesn't get any better, you can see how that can weigh on you as an employee. Maybe an employee is in a wrong role. Maybe the expectation on that employee or on that role is too much. Again, maybe there's staff shortages. It can be a lot of different reasons. But this idea of there just being too much work to be done can cause a lot of stress in the workplace. Some of that we can mitigate, we can adjust and change. Knowing that we'll both in this class and with you in the workplace, you're not going to have all the answers, right? When you're reading this book, you're going to get some strategies, which I really appreciate they put in there. I like the examples they put in are actually pretty, applicable real life examples. But realizing that we don't have all the answers. I am not the perfect person in dealing with stress, nor do I necessarily know how to help you deal with your stress. But we have to manage it. And when we're in the workplace, we have to acknowledge it. We have to in some way address it. At the simplest, most basic way, I think we can say it. I know you're stressed out right now. I know this is a stressful time right now. Here's what we have to do next, or here's what's going on with the situation. And ideally, at the end of the day, this is all coming back to this social interaction that we have with people. And at the base level, again, this talking about it, this recognition, I think can go a really long way. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of real life perspective, adding to some of the text that you're reading about here, and giving you some breadth of understanding with stress and emotions in the workplace. Thanks for being here.